It's a great feeling when you have a chapter go into a very basic, like, kind of check all for the whole area of this part of the power system and abilities in the verse. But also, I was right on the idea of how the whole exorcist and demon contract worked. I mean, I feel like it just made the most sense. I don't think it was really that complicated of a guess, but a really cool chapter in general. I mean, I really like the style of the manga. One thing too, I'm still really interested in getting into what the demons' powers and how their abilities work, because I mean, generally with the exorcist, they have their percept power, and I would assume it just generally fuels the ideas of whatever these different kind of abilities are. There's nothing that seems to be kind of out of the ordinary with, you know, with how their whole structure works, whereas like the demons just seem they have some form of demonic energy, and then they have just like formed attacks with it. We haven't seen too much in terms of strange abilities from the entirety of the verse, but I mean, that's one of the things that's really cool about early parts of the series, is you can have more direct physical confrontations, and characters can have, you know, not have any underlying weird effects that you got to look out for. And you'll probably run into that at some point, but the fact that you don't have that as a baseline now, I would imagine makes doing the battles a lot simpler. But Jack Joe and Nihon have fused together. I'm kind of hoping at some point when he gets a little bit more serious, he'll go more by his last name, or at least in short, like get a nickname, because his last name, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Sanzugawa. So it's you just shorten that Sanzu, like the Sanzu River. So it's like he has like a cool badass connection name in the core of his like character styling. So I'm hoping at some point we get like an advancement of his like persona that he like is combining with Jack Joe, because they don't name what the form is. I'm guessing it's going to be different transformations similar to this, and they'll have names that get associated with each, and it would be kind of, you know, some form of superhero-ish name for each form. You know, he's got an elemental hero like GX, but we have a direct explanation into just the confrontation between him and Tsurugi, like, you know, well, Jack Joe, Nihon, and then trying to confront Tsurugi to teach him how to fight. I think that was something that, again, I guessed when this chapter came out, the one where they were, you know, went and tried to talk to him in the first place, and it just made sense to me. He's though Tsurugi initially saying no, I thought that would be likely, but he would be like kind of more so direct in being kind of polite about it, but he's like, oh no, that's not my job. I thought that was pretty funny. But as it were, they're having like a whole bit of how even though it's risky, they want to kind of do their part. They understand that like he, like, once Tsurugi essentially pushed Jack Joe and they were going just back and forth and they were demonstrating his power as a demon lord, they decided that if anything ever happens to him where he goes out of control, he wants him to actually end up exorcising him and to take care of him. So it's like an exchange for a, hey, I am going to do my best to not go crazy and be an unhinged monster, and in exchange for that, if I do, you can exorcise me. And that also plays in for Nihon, because it's like, in exchange, if I don't do my job controlling him and keeping him under wraps, then I accept this fate for it. You know, he's putting the responsibility on him as well, because now they have to be able to control this power and get to it. And I'm guessing at some point we'll probably get like a cool like a berserk form, like a rage version of him, like when we had Jack Joe lose control before, and maybe something like that where it's not directly just he is like a wordless monster yelling, but more of a, I'm thinking like a rage edgy version for Nihon. I think that would be badass, because maybe we'll have a couple different forms. I like this first one because it's basic, but it's really cool looking. And I didn't notice until this chapter of where the extra arms were. I don't think that was visible really in the last chapter like too well. Maybe I just missed it and other people got it. But I like that his he's got his normal arms with the spear, and then he's got the extending like demonic arms coming out of his back. Because one thing in the verse, the demonic power that they have, it doesn't seem to be directly, again, a name. We don't have anything exact and concrete, but we have a direct explanation into how the power of their ability works, and he has to go into his shadow. And so how it works, and again, this makes sense really fast. I want to mention, it makes a lot of sense that Tsurugi's aware of this. This isn't like just one of those, oh, I'm a really high level smart character and I'm knowledgeable in the verse, so I just know. No, he was teamed up with Sakaki, so it makes sense he would understand that, you know, once he puts the same effect that Sakaki has on high stakes and potentially other demons, we don't know if he only has one, then, you know, it completely checks out that Tsurugi would understand, like, yeah, the fundamental way that you do this, he has to jump in your shadow, and once he jumps in your shadow, the shape of what exactly your guys' way of fighting is determined. And again, I'm curious to know if there's going to be stages and forms. Right now, obviously, we just have one. We can't say 100%. I would say very likely, at least there's the form that we saw when Jack Joe lost it and he was kind of crazy, just because that is apparently what his actual power was, or at least in that direction. So it would make sense that this is the current Jack Joe and current Nihon, and it, even though Jack Joe at this point can't use his power normally, it makes sense that through a catalyst that their power is able, like his power is able to be accessed through Nihon, because it doesn't go through what Jack Joe can do. It goes through what Nihon is able to access through the mechanics of this, you know, this power, which makes a lot of sense in the way of the verse, because he is, you know, if Jack Joe has all this built-in power and potential and capability, he just has no access to it. But the way that this kind of overlay power that they have works, it completely eliminates the whole crippling unobtained grasp that Jack Joe has, because then it goes into Nihon, who is able to directly bypass any of that, just because once their power goes off, this is just a you know, a passive state of it. They become one. So it just I would assume it would be like it'd be like trying to, like, if you didn't have parts to access stuff on a computer, but you had it all turned on, you didn't have like a keyboard or a mouse or anything, but somebody remote controlled in, they would be able to do it all from their end. So it still would work all indirectly rather, through a second means of access. But I really like the idea of that, because it's really unique in, again, how it can be almost anything, I would assume. It just depends on the person and the demon. Whereas Nihon, I would assume him and Jack Joe are going to be one-on-one. I don't imagine they're going to end up like he's going to need another demon besides him. Maybe I'll be surprised and there'll be some extra thing. Maybe he'll absorb Baku Hiraku or something next chapter. But it would make sense, again, that he only would need one too, because he was, I would assume, the previous 5th level demon lord, by the way that Baku Yuraku is talking in this chapter. And because of that, it's like the 5th level, and then by the mechanics of how the demon contract and this ability works, you would kind of like cliff it from there. If all you have the base power, you have the skill of the person, and then you have the bond between the two of them, there, you know, there's all ability to synchronize and whatnot. If say like Jack Joe was high up there and they didn't have a bond, and obviously Nihon himself is not skilled, that would make sense of why they're not able to access this full power. But two of the things out of there are accessed, kind of, again, the power of the demon, which is able to get skipped over the nerfs because of how the ability works, and then the bond between them. And the bond between them, I've talked about this since the start of the series online. Like I've talked about this for a long time. I haven't talked about it too much on my channel, just because I waited a while to do reviews of the series, because I was worried that I didn't want to get too attached if the series ended up not making it, but it looks like we're good. But it just makes sense that the point of the bond would completely exceed the lack of direct skill that that Nihon has, because these guys have grown up together essentially as best friends and as brothers, so they would have that near maxed out. And I really like that, again, in the display that they were in the chapter, because I don't want to talk about Bakayuraku too, but because the thing that they are lacking is the combat experience for both of them, but also the Exorcist capabilities from Nihon, because really, like, just what they do, in the last chapter you see it, where similar to how Jack Joe reached, just kind of slammed his enlarged hand into Tsurugi, that's what they opened the fight with Bakayuraku doing. And it's because I think that they don't have a lot of overall power experience and knowledge and just time using the power. They don't have a lot of creative ways of using it, and I think that's one of the things that just comes over time. Because if you think about it, say, like, you have a power, you have a base thing that you go off of, and you can look at, say, Hitsugi, for example. He's got his holy water gun, and then he eventually goes into getting a crest, and then from there, he's got one attack so far. He's going to slowly create more attacks or learn them from, depending on how exactly it works. I would assume you can kind of just create them, but from as they go, I would assume they're going to be able to do more things, because it's not like he's directly stretching his arms out. He's creating them out of the demonic energy, like, just wrapped around his body. So he would be able to do the same thing, I would assume, with his legs, maybe just make himself bigger, because, again, that would make sense. He swells the amount of energy that he's got on him, and he's able then to take a bigger form. That it would check out of just, again, what we already saw within the series. But again, I wanted to talk about Bakayuraku because I liked his character once we were showing him initially, because he's a good example of a demon that we're of like powers of the demons in the verse. Because it really, when you think about it, and this is something that I don't want to go too much into, just because I'll end up making this video way too long, but the way that we saw the demons being introduced in the series, we had the two demon lords at the start, and then after that we ended up really getting very just short, quick, easy defeated demons, because we were learning about the other characters like Akari. We were going over then to the stuff with Jack Joe and learning about that with Tsurugi, and then going over to the Grand Cross stuff. And until really recently, that's like, okay, yeah, and then it's like Azudaroth, and then it's like, until recently we haven't had a lot of demons that lasted long in a fight, other than, again, Azudaroth. But he is one of the big demons in the verses, one of the three great demon lords. So Bakayuraku is one of the, he's really going to be one of the first displays of a demon in a full fight. Even if this fight is only one chapter, it still is like a direct showing of what's the ground of what the powers and what we're seeing in the verse are going to be. You have a guy who has 6 eyes. He's able to see in all these different directions. He's got a long range, I guess more of like a mid-range kind of reach generally, because it's not like he can well, I guess he can stretch it kind of. So he's got a long reach, medium reach plus, we'll give him that. Just general attack range with his trident, and he's able to do some cool attacks and stuff with it and channel his demonic power through it. But he didn't have any kind of weird, again, abilities that he pulled out. And I think, again, it's a display of what the verse is going to have, where you're going to generally see demons where they have fighting styles and whatnot that is exclusive to what kind of demon they are. Like, if one of them is like a spider demon, they're going to have types of abilities and attacks with venom and silk and whatnot, and just general, the direct things you would get from there. Like, this guy has 6 eyes. He's able to see in all these directions, so he's a very quick, everywhere hitting around him martial artist who's doing a lot of counter response attacks. But I liked a lot that once he recognized Jack Joe, he was like crying for a minute, and he was all worked up. But at the same time, he's really annoyed that he lost his memories, because he mentions that this is the guy that he used that idolized Jack Joe, and that he went up to, he would use him as his goal to eventually achieve the heights that he's at. So I think that makes sense too, that Jack Joe used to be the 5th rank, unless it was higher. But I think 5th rank would just make the most sense. Maybe we'll find out directly what the previous title that Jack Joe held once he was before he lost his power. I think 5th is just the one that makes the most sense to me, because it puts Nihon and Jack Joe's potential in terms of just raw power potential and capability from the Jack Joe power plus the bond that they have together, where that's at. It puts them in a pretty strong starting point, but also with a direct area that keeps them very nerfed, because this is literally their first time trying into a direct fight. I mean, they had skirmishes with Tsurugi, so it's not like they're jumping in here with no combat experience, so they have an idea of what to do. And I would imagine too, just combining with Jack Joe, there has to be a little bit of muscle memory to a degree. I'm wondering as well, when they're like this, if Nihon is able to directly control the arms and then have Jack Joe take over, or is it always Jack Joe that has the arms coming out of his back and they're kind of fighting at the same time? Because as they're fighting, it's not like their voices are synchronized. I would imagine they can, but Jack Joe talks independently, and you see the face of the mask move around, of the little ghost face. So it's clear that he's being hurt when the arm is like that, but I can't tell if Nihon is as well. I don't think so, which makes me think that he can control those arms either by Jack Joe doing it himself, or I would assume through his mind or something like that. Maybe it feels like he could kind of control that as just a raw energy, but he doesn't get hurt when he gets stabbed because it's part of Jack Joe, which would also make a lot of sense. As well as, like I said, this dude's fighting style is really cool, because I like it's basic, it's direct, and you can understand everything that he's doing in how he in how he's doing it. Dude is doing just a freaking blunt smash with the bottom of his trident, just pressure force, just completely smacks his guy away. But at the same time, I really like seeing how Jack Joe and Nihon fight, because they're just using the hands to try and move around, to kind of jump around on poles and off walls and buildings and stuff, and just trying to approach and grab this guy. But at the moment, it would make sense again to me that they don't have the full grasp on even really where they're at the start of the fight, because it would just be, you wouldn't have the full understanding of a real direct battle until you go into a real direct battle, because it's not the same as training, where you're not going to die in that scenario relatively in a normal case. But this is a match that is to the death. And to this guy, Bakujiraku, the way that he does the stanced pose, and he puts up the one hand while spinning his weapon, just looks so badass. And he does this 6 ways, 3-pronged each, so he's doing an 18-pronged attack, slamming into you, which I would assume that, similar to how the demons can regenerate, that in this state that Jack Joe and Nihon have a level of regeneration. So Nihon isn't gonna be just hospitalized right after this, because that, even blocking that would be horrible, because you would have 18 different puncture wounds all along, because it's hewed across. So it would go, just looking at it, it looks from not over your arms, so it's your shoulders, all from your underarms, all the way across your chest and your stomach, and completely around. It would just be horrible to move around like that. But again, it makes sense that he's able to do more with the extended extra hands rather than his than just kind of grabbing him with his normal smaller arms. So that makes me wonder too, as his power will grow, is there going to just be an exponential rate of the Jack Joe extendy arms versus his normal physical strength? Because that seems to be, at least in this form that they're at right now, where a lot of the power is. Because they had this spear, and this was something that was neat, because I'd have to go back and look at other chapters, and I don't want to ramble on for too long, because it's almost 20 minutes. this chapter, I knew I didn't want to talk too long. I didn't want to make it too long, but there was so much stuff that I wanted to talk about because we had stuff for the demons that again showed Bakuraku to be not just be a bland evil guy character, like being sad seeing his old idols be there. Just having a display of like his fighting moves. Like there was just a lot of like neat stuff from him, as well as the backstory of what happened with Tsurugi, explanations on how like the powers and stuff work. But as it were, he had this spear, and it makes sense that then Bakuraku has his weapon because he would model what weapon he was going to use then by Jack, Joe, and Nihon. So it makes me wonder if he used to have a weapon, and that's something that is going to be explained later, and what exactly is the deal with that? Because it would, if he has it, unless he takes another form and he has a different weapon, it would make me think that this weapon used to be what Jack Joe, when he had full control, would be utilizing, but probably at like a much greater size, because he was large. So in that hulked form, I don't think that was his full power, so he's probably is a chunk bigger. And just imagine like it proportionate, instead of it being probably like a regular, like probably like a pitchfork for a regular person, is probably to him more like I'm just trying to just like a flatbed truck with arms of metal or something. But I thought it was really cool in how he looked when he grabbed onto his horns, and the idea of the attack where he's ideally, I would assume, either he's close enough to just get an instant strike, or he's gonna have a chunk of distance away to where he pulls in, he's gonna just gain a lot of speed and just become like a spear rocket going into somebody. And again, what's cool too is I would assume that the form itself will have a name, because he doesn't have any named attacks, at least yet. I would assume it'd be similar to how Azudaroth had, he did that one sword move where it was Scattering Radon, where it's just an energy additional version of something you do with your weapon. It's nothing like crazy. It's just a like different way that you can kind of clad your weapon and disperse an energy attack with it. But I thought it was just really cool in how it, again, a direct, just super brutal, but easy and understand way of fighting him, that he grabs him by the horns, which again is badass, and then just goes for a full like rocket spear into this dude. And this is again where they explain about like the powers, when Tsurugi is saying like the way that the power of this ability kind of really comes to flourish is the strength of the demon, which I talked about, and extra skills, but then the bond between them. And it'd be completely different. Say like, we don't know exactly when Sakaki and High Stakes met, but even if you say they met when he was pretty young, like let's just say before, I would assume after, to be honest. Let's just say after he went through like the Grand Cross stuff, he was probably already well into his teens. I'm pretty sure he was already like later, because Kiyoshi was younger going through, so probably in his like late teens to early 20s. I don't want to go into calendar year right now. I don't want to worry about it. Actually, is it older? See, that's gonna bother me. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But obviously, like I said, Jack, Joe, and Nihon just growing up together, and it not even being like Jack Joe was this adult demon that just kind of latched onto him and was and it was just thought this kid was interesting, and it's like, oh, I'm just gonna be here, and this kid made me nice. No, when they met, Jack Joe was essentially was reset and was like a little kid demon. So they've known each other respectively their whole lives, and they've been living together. And on top of that, before Kiyoshi, he was the only one that could see Jack Joe. So from Jack Joe's perspective, Nihon was his only friend that he's ever known, ever. So I think this just made a lot of sense of how he was able to gain the level of power to get this in. I don't know if this is going to be 100% the end move, because we know that they can regenerate. It seems that if they're hit with an overwhelming level of power that it's beyond what their power is, that they can't regenerate from it, seemingly. Or there's going to be a little bit more to this fight. Maybe he's going to use an attack, or Bakuraku is going to maybe just get crumbled, or maybe actually he'll decide to surrender or something, or we'll have something kind of unknown about that where he's one of the demons where he's defeated, but he kind of switches sides and becomes a character later. Who knows? There's a lot that could come out of it. He could just literally be dead, but I would at least like to imagine that there'll be something at the start of the next chapter. Like, we don't get the next chapter and this fight isn't touched. There's some form of resolve around this character, even if it's Bakuyaraku is just makes a comment about Jack Joe and Nihon, and then he dies. Like, literally, if it's something like that, it'd at least make his character have like a nice out. Because we know that the demons. This is one of the last things I do want to mention, because I've said before that, oh god, this video's already a half hour. I didn't want this to happen. The whole structure of the demon world generally, we know that is very similar to the human world, and so a lot of the demons have had a humanizing aspects to them, and so they haven't felt just a lot of them haven't felt like just generic evil bad guys. Some of the ones obviously, but what we're seeing is now is more signs to them that make them, again, better villains, even if it's in a short period of time. And I've said before, I really like this manga because that's one of the things that really makes this manga sit as I would say my favorite right now. The ones competing, Galaxia's is the number 2. Like, Galaxia's is very good, I would say, as well in terms of these things, but it doesn't have nearly as many characters as Kiyoshi. But Kiyoshi doesn't have the world building that Galaxia's already has. But both of those things are starting to expand, where we'll see where things are. If they continue at the pace, they'll probably be tied. It's hard to say, and it makes sense because both of these series are just so interesting to me, and I really like the style and the formatting. But right now, at least in Jump, I would say this is for sure my favorite one. And then overall, it's like around, I would say, 1 for now for the current new gen, and then potentially tied once Galaxias gets me a couple more characters. But we'll see. As it were, really good chapter, really good, just kind of cool display of menacing power for Jack Joe and Nihon. Again, the explanation of it completely aligned with a lot of what you would expect and make sense from 2 characters combining, again, a body and power to essentially become a fused variant of the 2 of them. Everything really lined up. I'm just really curious as to where the stuff with Bakuyaraku is going to go next chapter, if he's going to be able to fight a little bit longer or what, because Nihon and Jack Joe are hurt, and we see in the chapter, like, he's getting beaten up a lot and he's not a great fighter yet, but it's still in an area where I would assume they could go on a little bit longer in a fight, even if it's just like a half chapter more. But we'll see. It could just be over here. Other than that, talk to you guys in the next one.